Alright, let's do this. Hello, I'm Alex, or Dingus, as you might know. Um, I apologize for the sound quality. I couldn't really figure out a way for it to record my voice without sounding horrible. Turn my fan off, at least. Anyways, I'd like to do a little short thing on how I do figure drawing. Now, one thing that I will point out in the beginning of this is I draw very quickly, and I refine things later on as I draw. So the first initial sketch isn't going to be perfect, but as I keep working on it, it'll look better, and it'll look better. First things first. Get over here. When I'm working from a reference, the first thing I do is I work from the same size canvas, or I work with it on the canvas that I'm working on. So if I was drawing, like when I was drawing, oh geez, can't find him. When I was drawing Iago, I have my reference on my page. When I was doing this drawing, I had my reference right next to me. It's just a matter of personal preference. Now, the reason I do this is because when I'm drawing, I want everything to fit along with sizing and negative space. I will get into both of those things as I continue on. Next thing I want to touch on is drawing on your reference is super helpful. This is more difficult when you're working in real life because you can't exactly draw on your model, but when you're working from a reference, you can draw on it so that you can see things and ignore things that you normally see. Like on this lady, I want to ignore her facial expression, I want to ignore her glasses, I want to ignore her hair, I want to ignore her clothes, and so I ignored all those things when I drew over it immediately. Now, number one, 10 out of 10, do not do is straight up steal this sketch and draw on it, because that's straight up copying and that's illegal, children. You use this as a reference as you would the photo. Another thing, when you're starting out, at the very beginning, I like to work very big with my brushes. This may not be the hugest brush, but I refine as I move down. Now we're going to get into more nitty-gritty and stuff. How do you draw the person? There's three things that I want y'all to keep in mind when drawing a person. Number one is going to be sizing. Sizing is basically using your unit of 1. What is the first thing you draw in an object? It's typically your unit of 1. So when you're drawing a person, what's the first thing you usually draw? The head. So this size right here, once I get the shape down right, that's why we use a big brush, kids, so we can cut it down into the size we want. Once we have this shape right here, we use that size and compare it to the rest of the object. Now, let me make a new layer for this. Head is about that big. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to use this as a reference for the rest of my sizes. From her chin down, it should be lining up with this part on her chest. And do not be afraid to mess with sizes, because right now I know my head is pretty dang big. Okay, I know that size. Going down here from the chin, that same size, that's where her armpit is. Now, angles. You see you have this right here, the angle of the shoulders, or it could be the angle of the arms, or the angle of the legs, or even the angle of the torso if we go from this part to this part. If you get this angle right, everything will come into line. One thing I recommend for getting the angle right is going over the angle on the reference several times, getting that muscle memory, and then repeating that on your object. I already got it pretty damn close, so I'm just going to refine it a little bit. Another thing about basics of sizing is where things line up. Like her ear lines up with the inner corner of where that ends, so I'm going to mark that down. Maybe in a little smaller brush. If I wasn't teaching, I would have been all over the big brush. One thing is I move a lot slower when I'm teaching, because if I went as quickly as I normally would, then y'all wouldn't be able to keep up with me. Got the titty right there. And here I want to keep in mind the angle of the hips. So I'm going to get into that muscle memory again. Put that down. Now, what do I mean by negative space? I'm going to zoom in for this one. And if you zoom in on your drawing, zoom in on your reference. It'll help you a lot. What is negative space? Negative space is whatever is not the figure, essentially. And this little space right here is a shape, and you can draw that shape. So to make sure you're getting an angle right, you can make sure you draw that shape. If you get that shape correctly right there, you'll get the angle of, in this case, the arm correct. See, that looks nice. Alright, I'm just gonna keep going along this, and I'm gonna talk through my things. Now, I'm seeing that she's a little over a little bit, so I'm gonna center her a little bit more. I actually think she's a little too angled in this one, because this is more of an up and down. And then this one caves in, and then we go in on the pelvis. Yeah. Belly button, because that's important. When you're drawing your sketch on the figure, you want that to be in a way that you're going to sketch it. So if, like me, I like to make sure my muscles are seen, especially the deltoid and the bicep, and so I drew out the deltoid and the bicep on the figure. Now, one thing that some people get wrong is whenever it comes to interactions of objects. Here we have an interaction between this hand and this hand through a pole. So if we put in that pole, we'll be able to place those hands. The pole goes in through here, and it's going at this angle. So I'm going to get that muscle memory down. I'm going to get that angle. Yeah, I'm going to play around with it until I get that angle right. Oh no! Thought I was doing that on a different layer. Oh well. Let's try that again. Alright, different layer. Don't be afraid to use a lot of lines. Alright, that seems about right, but I noticed something wrong. My head ain't turning enough. Let's rotate that a little bit. There we go. Oh no, I deleted it. Nope, there we go. I'm gonna lower the opacity on that. Now, I want you to know that I may be making it look easy because this is just what I'm used to. I have this sort of muscle memory. I have this style trained into me because this is how I draw. Now, some people draw a little bit differently than I. I usually draw with shapes, so that's why I'm drawing out the shape of the legs instead of doing the skeletal system, like drawing this frame of the leg and then drawing the leg around that. I don't like that because I feel it makes my drawing stiff, and so I do shapes. Alright, let's scale this down some. Don't be afraid to play around with morphing tools, because if you recognize a mistake, don't let it stay a mistake. And anyways, back to the whole skeletal thing. If you work with a skeleton, that is perfectly fine because everybody has their own way that they draw. If you work with a skeleton, it may be more helpful to you to draw that skeleton on them and use the angle system to draw in the skeleton. I just kind of guesstimate whenever it comes to angles. Alright, these legs are a little big. Alright, and now that I would have this kind of stage, I would make a new layer, lower the opacity a bit, and go in and start refining things. Starting with the head, because that's where I started with this drawing. Go with a smaller brush and start getting some of them refined details. Oh, that needs to be a little bit bigger. And if you see that you did something wrong, it's perfectly fine, because that's the whole point of art. Art is about making mistakes. I'm looking at that negative space and I'm thinking that I need to pull it in a little bit. Maybe pull this arm out. Sorry, I'm getting a little quiet, but I'm drawing and I don't normally talk while I'm drawing unless I'm teaching a class, which I'm kind of doing now, but that's besides the point. At this point, essentially. Why is it? Alright. You see how I'm comparing shapes right here? This ain't fitting together with that negative space here. I know it's wrong. So I'm gonna extend this extendo armo. I sure hope y'all can't hear my dogs, 'cause they are screaming. Make sure these are lined up. If y'all have any questions, you can always, like, at me, you know. I try to reply to everyone's drawing critique, unless it's the same critique I've said 1,000 times. This arm should be raised up. And you know what? I'm gonna be honest. I'm just trying to find stuff to fill the time at this point. Is you just gotta know that it's not gonna be perfect, but be satisfied with what you get. Got some needle thin legs. Not dummy thick like me. They're actually a little bit smaller. Alright. Honestly, that looks pretty nice. I thought I was gonna get the anxiety farts and mess it up. But you know what? I did pretty alright.